Let's take our Bibles and go to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter number 9. The message this morning is not in response to what happened yesterday in Israel with Iran and all of that. Of course, we found out about that last night at during the youth meeting, and I wasn't in here when Brother Chris had announced it. And I was still back there trying to get ready to come in, and he came back there and told me after the service what had happened. And, of course, a lot of us are looking at that. A lot of us are interested. And after thinking about it and trying to clean up here, I decided to get online last night and on Facebook, and I said something about it because when we start hearing about Israel or anything like that, I feel like I have a responsibility to say something. And so I did, so this message is not really about that. And yes, I am undoing the tie just a little bit. I got sunburnt yesterday. I'm a mountain preacher this morning, all right? So I got to undo some of this because it feels like every time I turn my head that a rope is just being, coming across my neck. So I'm going to just lose it. I have never been tempted to preach in a T-shirt before until this morning. I'll just tell you that. But this message is not in response to what's going on there. Even though, we will look at Israel, of course, a good bit this morning. Daniel chapter 9, I'm going to ask that you stand in reverence to the Word of God if you're able today. Daniel 9, verse 20, the Bible says in Daniel 9:20, "And whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, whilst I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the Prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And to the end of the war desolations are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. And for the overspread of abominations he shall make it desolate, even until the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." Let's go to the Lord in prayer. I'm going to ask if Brother Bruce Martin, Brother Bruce, if you wouldn't mind leading us in prayer. Thank you. You may be seated. Normally this is not a type of message that I would do on Sunday morning. It's an every now and then type of thing. As I said, for a Sunday morning a few months ago, I dealt with the Ezekiel 38 and 39 prophecy with Gog and Magog, and that's very interesting seeing what's going on right now, because that definitely involves Israel and Iran. But today we're looking at another prophecy. And I guess my mind started getting on this. I've taught this before. during the service, but never on a Sunday morning. But in Sunday school recently, I had a message on the fruit of the Spirit ready, but I did not have liberty to teach that message. I actually did it this morning. I was supposed to do it a couple of weeks ago. And so what I did, and I felt God moving me to do this, is I asked the Sunday school, if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, let's do that today. That's a very dangerous thing to do. But that's what God laid on my heart, so that's what I did. And so actually the first question, and a lot of times when you ask a question like that, you have to sit in an awkward silence for 20 seconds before someone says something. I didn't have to wait for that. 1 or 2 seconds, a question came about predestination. So boom, we went predestination. Right after that, it was, I think, in the realm of the 144,000 witnesses and something to do with them. And then we talked about Bible translations and manuscripts. But then kind of the last thing that was asked, we had about 10 minutes left, it had to do with the 70 weeks of Daniel prophecy. And that's what this is. That's what we just read, was the 70 weeks of Daniel prophecy. And so in 10 minutes, somehow I tried to summarize that particular prophecy. And so I did the best that I could. And it was interesting. A lot of what we talked about, though, had to do with prophecy. And there's a thirst for that. There's a thirst for teaching and preaching on the book of Revelation and prophecies related to the end times. And I think there's probably a thirst for this because we're not doing that enough. There's not enough of our churches that is dealing with such things. We're so busy throwing softballs out there. We're so busy playing politics and trying to appease and entertain. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm not here to appease you. I'm not here to play politics. It is my job to pastor this church, to be there with you when you're going through something hard. But it's also my job to preach the whole counsel. And guess what? 30% of the whole counsel is prophecy. Now, if we go based on that, 30% of the Bible is prophetic. That means we have 4 services a week. Really, at least one of them, we should be dealing with something that is prophetic. And so that is what we're doing today. The title of the message this morning is The 70 Weeks of Daniel. The 70 Weeks of Daniel. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to go through this. I've got several points. It's going to be up here today on the screens. I know we don't normally do that. We did that before we went online, and I just trying to make it as easy as I can for the sound guys. The sound guys do such a great job. I appreciate them so much. Josiah, Michael, Brother Steve, they do a phenomenal job, and they're trying to operate the sound. They're trying to operate the online part. They got to deal with me, which is not the easiest thing in the world. And then now I asked Brother Steve, he's like, Brother Steve, would you mind doing this? Of course, he was fine with doing it, and I so appreciate it. But I want you to see some of these things. Now, I'm not going into the greatest detail. That I don't have time for that today. You just don't. This prophecy, you don't. So I'm going to summarize it, but I'm going to summarize it in a way where I'm going to explain everything, and hopefully when you leave here today, you will have learned something if you didn't already know these things. And so, when it comes to the 70 weeks prophecy, it does not just affect the first coming, which it does, but it also affects the second coming. And I think we got to be spending time on the first coming. We do that. We've also got to be spending plenty of time on the second coming. See, we've got to spend time on both. And last night in the message that I gave to Youth Rally, I talked about the second coming some. And really, more or less, get our minds on that. Where our minds need to be on this, that Jesus came and that He is coming again. So, number one this morning, I'm jumping right in the message. Number one is the messenger. Number one is the messenger. Let me give you an idea of what's happening. The book of Daniel. Daniel is in captivity still. He was taken captive as a child by the Babylonians. And he would be in captivity there, of course, for 70 years. But see, the Babylonians are gone now. Another group has come along, the Persian Empire. And the Persians are now, they've defeated Babylon, and they're in control of what the Babylonians, had, including Daniel. Now Daniel, he rose up in the ranks among the wise men of Babylon. In Persia, he's going to rise up even above that and become one of the main leaders there in the empire. But in Daniel chapter 9, what the most of this chapter is a prayer. Matter of fact, you start in verse 3 all the way through verse 19, verse 20, Daniel is praying. So the majority of this chapter is a prayer. Now what is he praying about? Daniel knows about a prophecy. A different prophecy than the 70 weeks, but a prophecy of 70 years. And that 70 years, that prophecy was given by Jeremiah in particular. And what it was that the nation of Israel would be in captivity for 70 years in Babylon. Well, Daniel, knowing the prophecy, knowing how long they've been there, realizes the 70 years is coming. It's almost, they're right at the verge of it. It's time for the people to go back. So his prayer is about the people going back to the promised land, about Israel returning. So with that in mind, while he's praying, look at verse 20, and he gets a messenger. Verse 20, and whilst I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, he wasn't just confessing the sins of Israel, he was confessing his own sins. And it says, and presented my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God. So while I'm praying for my people, while I'm praying for Israel, verse 21, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, while I'm doing this, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. So Gabriel has come. Now we know about, he's referred to as a man right here. He comes as the appearance of a man. That's how Michael is presented. That's how Gabriel is presented. That's how all the angels of God are presented actually, as young men for whatever reason. So in this case, Gabriel, and we know him before. He's the one that visited the Virgin Mary. So we know something about him. He comes and he visits Daniel while Daniel was praying. We even get the time. It is during the evening oblation. That is during the evening offering. Now you get to verse 22. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. Well, that is an understatement. What he is about to give Daniel is one of the greatest prophecies in the entire Bible. In verse 23, at the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I am come to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter and consider the vision. So he has come. Brother Mike, Brother Chuck, somebody, can you crank that closest air conditioner down just one notch for me? I'm burning up here. But he has come to give him understanding of things that are going to happen. So number one is the messenger. Number two is the message. Number two is the message. Let's look at verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Now let's stop right there. 70 weeks are determined. So this is letter A. Letter A is the time period of the 70 weeks. Now we think we know what 70 weeks are when we base it on our time frame. But we can't think under our time frame right now. We're dealing with something different here in Daniel chapter 9. So we're talking about 70 weeks. Now that word weeks right there in the Hebrew literally means 7. So in this case, if you look at Israel as a whole, this either 1 week, 1/7, either equals 7 days, which is our normal week, or it could also equal 7 years. So when you look at 1 week right here, this is talking about either 7 days or 7 years. See, the Israelites, they had more than one type of Sabbath. Because they had their special Sabbaths, but they also, which was their seventh day, of course, they also had their weekly Sabbath, their seventh day. But they didn't just have a weekly Sabbath. They had something called a sabbatical year. And the sabbatical year is so important to everything that is going on in Daniel chapter 9. And that is what informs us of what these weeks are. See, what do you mean? What is a sabbatical year? This is according to the law. Every 7th year, the nation of Israel was supposed to have a time of rest. They were not supposed to be growing anything. They're supposed to give the land rest. In the 6th year, they were supposed to grow more and store more, so the 7th year they didn't have to. So that's the sabbatical year. Well, guess what? The nation of Israel didn't keep it. They didn't keep the sabbatical year. For how long did they not keep the sabbatical year? For 490 years, they didn't keep it. Now, how many sabbatical years are in a 490-year period? 70. And that is why they were in captivity for 70 years. That was the punishment for not keeping the Sabbath for the Sabbath years. So how do we know this? We know this because that's what the Bible tells us. In 2 Chronicles, you can write these verses down, go check them out. But 2 Chronicles 36, verses 20 and 21. 2 Chronicles 36:20 says this. And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon. So this is the Babylonian captivity, where they were servants to him and his sons. And to him is to King Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. Where they were servants to him and his sons until the reign of the kingdom of Persia. Now, that takes us to the kingdom of Persia. That's where Daniel 9 is. So we're to the kingdom of Persia. Now let me read the next verse. 2 Chronicles 36:21. To fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept her Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. Well, 70 is 70. So God took them away from their land so that the land could have her 70 Sabbaths. 70 Sabbaths for the 490 years that the land did not have rest. So, we keep that in mind. We're talking about all of that. We're talking about 490-year period. God says, guess what? That 490-year period, because you didn't keep my Sabbath, you spent 70 years in captivity. I've got another 490-year period for you. And that's the 70 weeks of Daniel. The 70 weeks of Daniel is a period of 490 years. For who? And that leads me to my letter B. Letter B is the people of the 70 weeks. So, we got the time period of the 70. 70 weeks equals 490 years. There's other reasons why we know it talks about 490 years, but I just gave you one that we're already talking about a 490-year period. This is another 490-year period. Now, who is the people? Who is the 490 years for? Well, verse 24. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. All right? The answer is given. This is easy. This is so easy. This is like the 144,000 witnesses. There's been so much talk and so much said about the 144,000 witnesses. The 144,000 witnesses is one of the easiest things to study in the entire Bible. Because the Bible lays it out, we know who they are. It's 144,000 Jewish virgin males. That is what it is. The Bible lays it out. There's 12, and even lists the tribes. 12,000 from each of these 12 tribes. It's real simple. Well, this is real simple. Who is Daniel's people? Israel. Who's Daniel's city? Jerusalem. That's this holy city. So this one is super easy. The people of the 70 weeks. The 490 years is not for the Gentiles. The 490 years is not for the church, which is very important. The 490 years is for the nation of Israel. Now, let's get to the next point. Letter C. The purpose of the 70 weeks. The purpose of the 70 weeks. Now, these next points underneath the purpose is 1 through 6, I believe. They're not going to be on the screen. I'm taking them straight from the passage. You'll see them clearly, and I just did not want all of that on the screen. So let's look at verse 24 again. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Here comes the purpose. Number 1, to finish the transgression. So 490 years in that period. What's going to happen is this. Number 1, to finish the transgression. Now, what does that mean? Well, we're talking about Israel right here. Israel has transgressed. Israel has revolted against God. By the end of this 490-year period, they're going to come back. They're going to come back to the Lord. Here comes number 2 underneath this. To finish the transgression, and number 2, to make an end of sins. This is what Jesus did on the cross. Good thing is, that is not just for the nation of Israel. Jesus made an end of sins for all of us. He defeated sin and the power of it on the cross. So, that 490-year period, guess what fits in that 490-year period? Jesus dying on the cross. As a matter of fact, that's a major event of the 490-year period. So 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. Number 1, to finish the transgression. Number 2, to make an end of sins. And now number 3, to make reconciliation for iniquity. To make reconciliation for iniquity. We, because we've been against God, we are away from God. We need to be reconciled to God. Well, how does a person get reconciled to God? By the blood of Jesus Christ. So, this third one was also fulfilled. This was accomplished by Jesus dying on the cross and also by His resurrection. And so, we need to accept what Jesus has done so that we can be reconciled to God. And it is only by Jesus Christ that we can truly be reconciled. All right, here comes the fourth purpose of the 70 weeks. And to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness. To bring in everlasting righteousness. Well, Jesus did this at the cross. So he's reconciled us to him, but he will also accomplish this at the second coming as well. All right, let's go to number 5. Number 5 is to seal up the vision and prophecy. That's what it says right after, to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and prophecy. I told you I'm taking it straight from the passage. Now what is this? A lot of things have been said. I'm going to give you my personal opinion on this. The 70 weeks is mainly about Israel. Now we get to enjoy some of this. We've already seen that. But I think in particular, this 490-year period, since it's for them, so it's a prophecy and a vision for them. Then it says, when it talks about sealing up the vision and prophecy, it's not talking about all prophecy, but it's talking about prophecy that is related to the nation of Israel. So it's going to complete prophecy or seal up prophecy concerning them. And then the sixth one, number 6, the last purpose, is to anoint the most holy. Jesus Christ is the most holy. That's what Christ means. Christ and Messiah mean anointed one. So we say Jesus Christ, we are saying Jesus, the anointed one. And of course, Christ and Messiah is the same word. Christ is the Greek rendering of it in the New Testament. Messiah is the Hebrew rendering of it of the Old Testament. Talking about the same thing. So Jesus will be anointed the most holy. That's at the second coming when he will be crowned King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So that's the purpose. Very simple. Now we get to the difficult part. And that is letter D. The progression of the 70 weeks. How do they progress? How do they move forward? When do they start? 70 weeks are determined. 490 years are determined. But when does it begin? Well, it tells us in verse 25. Verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again and the wall even in troublous times. All right? So right there we have a beginning. There's a command. That's what's going to start it. Know therefore and understand from the going forth of the commandment. So, number 1, underneath letter D, number 1 is the commencement of the 70 weeks. This is what starts it. This is the beginning. I have dates down here, 445 or 444 BC. Now, why those dates? Well, we got to figure out which decree we're talking about. There's been 4 decrees or 4 commandments in regards to Jerusalem after Daniel was given this prophecy. Or around that time when he was being given this prophecy. Okay? So, what are they? Well, let's go decree by decree. Let's look at each one. The first decree, and this is not going to be up there. The first decree was the decree of Cyrus in Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. So the first one is the decree of Cyrus in Ezra 1, 1 through 4. That took place in 538 BC. You already see, I don't believe that's the decree that starts the 70 weeks, the 490-year period. So why do I not believe that? Because that decree was about rebuilding the temple. Here, this is in verse 25, it doesn't mention rebuilding the temple. Notice what verse 25 says. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, not the temple, but Jerusalem itself, unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. So it's about rebuilding Jerusalem, and it mentions in particular the streets and the walls. That's key. All right? So I don't believe it's the first decree. That's in regards to the temple. All right? The second decree. The second decree is the degree. Now I'm moving over to degrees. All right? Can I just use the word commandment? That's easier. I have a problem with the word decree. All right. Number 2, the commandment or decree of Darius, or Darius, depending on how you like to pronounce his name. That is found in Ezra chapter 6, verses 1 through 12. All right, now what is the second decree? All right, well this one took place in 520 BC, about 18 years later. And you know what this is? It's the same decree as Cyrus. See, they didn't really keep this decree. They got it from Cyrus. They went there. They laid a foundation. But remember, there were people there that were trying to stop them. There were enemies. So they became apathetic and complacent. So then you have some good men come along, some prophets, get them fired up again. And now Darius, the new king, he sends a decree saying, we need to do what Cyrus said, more or less. So this is not the right one either. This is not about rebuilding the wall or Jerusalem. This is about rebuilding the temple. So this is not the right one. All right, let's go to a third decree. Yeah. Number 3, the decree of Artaxerxes. In Ezra chapter 7, verses 11 through 26. Ezra 7, verses 11 through verse 26. When did this one happen? This one happened in 457 BC. A lot of people that have taught the 70 weeks prophecy believes that this is the decree at 457. And they believe it because they're trying to make math happen. That's the problem. Because when you read the decree there, Artaxerxes' first decree concerning it has nothing to do with rebuilding Jerusalem. It has nothing to do with the wall. So what's that decree about? It's about restoring the temple again. It's about the vessels and that type of thing. And bringing the vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had stolen. You could read it. It's real simple. That's not the decree. So we got to get to the fourth one. That's our last option. That one is the second decree of Artaxerxes. And it is found in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 8. It is in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. And it was in around 445 or 444 BC, because Artaxerxes began to be king in 465 BC. And as I said, it's the 20th year of his reign. So it's either 445 or 444, something like that. This is the one that fits the bill. See, the first 3 decrees, they all dealt with rebuilding the temple. This is the only one that dealt with rebuilding Jerusalem, and in particular, the wall during troublous times. Another thing you got to pay attention to, what did I tell you that Daniel 9, the majority of Daniel 9, what is that chapter about? It's a prayer. Daniel's praying. He's praying about them being able to go back to their homeland. All right, when you read Daniel's prayer in Daniel 1, compare it to Nehemiah's prayer in Nehemiah chapter 1, and they're very similar. In Nehemiah chapter 2, Nehemiah comes before the king, but he doesn't have the right countenance, which means he could be killed by the king of Persia. But the king of Persia likes Nehemiah. Nehemiah is his servant. And he asks Nehemiah what's wrong. And Nehemiah tells him. Because Nehemiah's heard bad reports about what's going on in Jerusalem. And what Artaxerxes does is he makes a commandment, he gives a commandment and a decree saying, go back and rebuild Jerusalem. And in particular, the wall. And that's what happens. So this is the decree. This is our starting point. Not 457, but 445 or 444 BC. Now, so that's number 1, the commitments of the 70 weeks. We know when it begins. Now let's go to number 2. Number 2 is the completion of Jerusalem. Completion of Jerusalem. All right. There are 3 different sections of the 70 weeks. There's these, well, really there's one major break, but there are like 3 different sections, okay? You've got, the first one is 49 weeks. I've got that up here, 49 weeks. 7 weeks. 7 weeks equals 49 years. And based on this prophecy. So let's look at verse 25. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. There's our 7. And 62 weeks. That's 62 weeks. So what is 62? You didn't know you were going to do math today. What is 62 plus 7? It's pretty sad. Yeah. But yeah, 69. All right, so 69 weeks. All right, what's next up here, brother? Can you just go and put it? There we go. All right. So the other 7 weeks equals 49 years. 62 weeks equals 434 years. So 49 plus 434 is 483 years. So when you combine these two, 7 weeks and 62 weeks, that equals 483 years. So what starts the 70 weeks is the commandment to restore and to build. That's 444, 445 BC. And then what do we read? It says, to restore, and this is the middle of verse 25, to restore and to build Jerusalem to the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. 7 plus 62 is 69 weeks. So from the beginning of the rebuild, or from the beginning of the decree, until the Messiah will be 483 years, or 69 weeks. Now, what we put up there was the completion of Jerusalem. And the reason why I put that up there is, why do you have a break? Why does it not just say, from the commandment to restore it until the Messiah, why does it not just say 69 weeks? And I believe there's a break, the first after 49 years, because I believe that is how long it took them to get everything done in Jerusalem. I think it took 49 years. And I think that's why that's put in there. And so it's not like there's not like a few months or years in between, or a long break. It's just saying it took 49 years for the project to be completely done. The wall was built less time than that. But I'm talking about getting everything accomplished. I believe it was 49 years. I could be wrong about that. The Bible does not specifically say. I'm just trying to figure out why the 7 weeks are separated from the 62 weeks. And that's the only thing that I can come up with. All right, let's move on to number 3. I don't want to get bogged down in that. Number 3 is the crucifixion of Christ. Number 3 is the crucifixion of Christ. Let's look at verse 26. And after 62 weeks, so remember, you've already had 7 weeks, and then the 62 weeks is after that, so it's talking about after those things. After 62 weeks, shall Messiah, that's talking about Jesus, shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. See, Jesus Christ was cut off. Jesus Christ was killed, but not because of anything he did. He was not cut off for himself. He was cut off, he was killed because of us. So, we have 483 years from the command to rebuild Jerusalem, until the Messiah would be cut off. Now, this is where it gets complicated. You're saying, oh man, my mind's already messed up. It hadn't got complicated yet. All right. I said, based on the decree, that is around 445, let's say either one, 445, 444 BC. If you go 483 years after that, then you come to the date of around AD 38, AD 39. We know that Jesus Christ did not die in AD 38 or 39. So we've got a problem. Yeah, we do have a problem. And that's why people went to the 457, the third decree. Because see, that works better. We can't just make things happen. We have to understand things. And we've got to understand this. Yes, we're Americans, and we think the world revolves around us. But guess what? We're young. We're new. And way before us, thousands of years before us, this is what was going on. And guess what? They didn't use our calendar. They used another calendar. Our calendar is 365 days a year. Their calendar went by the lunar calendar, 360 days a year. That is further verified in the book of Revelation. In Revelation, where it talks about 42 months, it also says that 42 months is 1,260 days. 1,260 days is not 42 of our months by our 365-day calendar. But it is 42 months when you have a calendar that is lunar, that is 360 days. And Revelation and Daniel go hand in hand. They're the greatest commentaries for one another. Daniel is like part 1. I'm laying stuff out. Revelation now comes in and finishes the job, more or less. So when you study Daniel, you have to study Revelation. When you study Revelation, you really need to study Daniel. Those two books go hand in hand. So now let's do this. Let's figure this out. Let's change things up. So when you convert 483 of our years into Jewish years, that is only 476 of our years. So when you do that, what that means is that it brings the date of AD 32 or AD 33, exactly when Jesus died. Most Bible scholars believe that Jesus died around AD 32 or AD 33. So why is the 70 weeks of Daniel so important? Because hundreds of years, 500 years before Jesus Christ died on a cross, the book of Daniel is predicting when he's going to die on the cross. And that is also why the book of Daniel is the most attacked book in the Bible. The devil hates this book. He hates all the Bible, but he hates this book. So, with saying all of that, that's 69 weeks. That's 483 years. But I remind you, the title of the message, is it the 69 weeks of Daniel? No, it's the 70 weeks of Daniel. What happened to the last week? The 70th week. What happened to it? Why is there a break there? Why, what's going on? What's happening right now that would cause a break between the 69th and 70th week? Anybody want to take a guess of what's happening right now that has caused a break between the 69th and 70th week? The church age. The church age. That's why. Who is the 70 weeks for? It's not for the church. It's for the nation of Israel. It's not about us. I know, isn't it amazing? There's something not about us. It's not about us. It's about them. So, when Jesus died on a cross, started a church, what happened to the nation of Israel is they were taken and they were put on a shelf. Yep. Now, God looked after them all these years. He did. Praise God for that. And I know there's a lot of false teaching that the church is Israel. That's not true. That is not biblical. That is called replacement theology. We did not replace Israel. God is not done with Israel. There's still a 70th week that has never been fulfilled. The other 483 years, the other 69 weeks, that's all happened. But the last one has not because of the church age. So Israel's on the shelf right now. There's going to come a time when they're pulled off the shelf. And that gives me to number 5. Number 5 is the conclusion of the 490 years. You've got to have an end. You've got to have the 70th week. You've got to have the last 7 years. And we find the last week in verse 27. Verse 27 says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with many." For how many weeks? For 1 week. That's the last week, the 70th week, the last 7 years. "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week," what is the middle of 7? 3.5. Okay? "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week." And let me stop right there. Why is 3.5 important? I gave some numbers out a while ago. In the book of Revelation, it talks about 42 months. It talks about 1,260 days. What is 42 months and what is 1,260 days? 3.5 years. That's what that is. "And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, for 7 years. And in the midst of the week, 3.5 years in, he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease." So whoever this he is, he's going to stop the sacrifices in the temple. Say the temple. Well, there is no temple of God. Not yet. Because when you read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, we understand there's going to be a temple again in Jerusalem. Jesus talks about it in Matthew 24. He's letting you know that the temple is going to be destroyed. But guess what? One day there's going to be another one. So one day it's going to be there. I don't know when. But I know it's going to be there during this 70th week, during that 7 years. It says, "In the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease, and for the overspread of abominations he shall make it desolate." So he's going to make the temple and the altar and all that, he's going to make it desolate. He's going to desecrate it, whoever this person is. He says, "Even to the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate." So he's going to desecrate the temple. Another term for this is the abomination of desolation. Jesus talks about it. Daniel talks about it other places as well. All right. So who's going to do this? Who is going to desecrate the temple? The Antichrist. Jesus is not going to do it. Jesus is not going to be here during this time. And we're not going to be here either. See, it's not about us, remember? The 70th week. You ever wonder why Bible scholars refer to the tribulation period as a 7-year tribulation? Why? The 70th week of Daniel. That's why. It's the last 7 years. We're not going to be here. We're going to be raptured before that. Why? Because the 70 weeks is not about us. It's about Israel. The moment we get taken out, guess what happens to Israel? They're taken off that shelf. Right there in the middle again. We're seeing it. We're seeing it right now. We've been seeing it for a number of years. For 1900 years, Israel roamed the ghettos of Europe. They even eventually ended up over here. But in the 1940s, where did they go? They went back. They went back to their homeland. And since they've been back, you've had fighting and war one after another. You had the 6-Day War, you had the Yom Kippur War, and then you got Hamas back in October, and now you got what's going on yesterday with Iran. And once again, I didn't know all that was going to happen before I started preaching this today. That's just the way it is. I didn't know 3 months ago when I was preaching about the Gog and Magog prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and 39 that this was about to happen. But you read Ezekiel 38 and 39, Persia, Iran is mentioned as someone that's going to attack Israel. Now, what happened yesterday, is that fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39? No, it is not. But we may be getting to that point. That's what we got to keep in mind. It was not fulfillment yet. You know what that could have been? It could have been nothing what happened yesterday. Could be, I don't know. Or it could be the beginning of something. It could be. What it does let us know is that something is happening. So, the 70th week is still future. That last 7 years, we're not going to be here. We're going to be somewhere else. We're going to be with the Lord. Now let's go to number 3. This is my last point. And I'll be pretty quick about it. Number 3, the meaning. The meaning of this. I read verse 27 to you. Read these other verses about the 70 weeks. What is the meaning of this? Once again, this is a message to Israel that a lot was going to happen during a 490-year period. And somewhere along the way, their Messiah was going to be cut off, which he was. Now, what they could not have comprehended is this. The Messiah was going to have 2 comings. A first coming, which happened at the end of the 69th week, and a second coming that's going to happen at the end of the 70th week. See, the rapture is not the second coming. No, the rapture is a secret coming. The rapture is a calling us out of here. And after we're called out of here, there's going to be a peace treaty of some kind that we read about in Daniel 9:27 right there. He shall confirm a covenant with many. My guess is he's going to confirm a covenant with the nation of Israel along with others. And that's going to be the Antichrist is going to do this. People are going to think he's Superman. He's going to be great. He's a false Messiah. He's an Antichrist. We're not going to be here. We're going to be gone. But Israel's going to be here. The rest of the world's going to be here. And they're going to think this Superman, this Antichrist, is the Messiah, that he's going to fix all their problems. But in the middle of it, 3.5 years in, he's going to show his true colors. He's going to show who he really is when he sets up the abomination of desolation. And at the end of that 7-year period, he's going to have full reign for a while there. But at the end of that 7-year period, Jesus is going to come back at the battle of Armageddon. You read that in Revelation chapter 19. Now, right now, we're in a season where both comings, the first coming and the second coming, are being talked about. We just had Easter. First coming, death, burial, resurrection. And then we had an eclipse. And the eclipse, of course, meant that Jesus is coming. It don't mean that. It doesn't mean that at all. I told the youth yesterday, there are 4 dates given this year. 4 dates. That's the date that Jesus is going to come back. Guess what? All 4 of them are wrong. There you go. They're all wrong. April 8th, Jesus was going to come back. Did he? Did he rapture us out of here? This sure don't look like heaven. No. My back's been hurting. I'm sunburnt. That's not heaven. No. The second date is April 23rd. I found that one out a couple of days ago. Okay. I've got that pamphlet on my desk, May 11th. They got another one in September. Get away from these dates. Jesus is coming again. We don't know when, but he's coming again. So the meaning of this is, you know what? The Bible predicted that when Jesus was coming the first time, the Bible tells us he's coming again, but he also tells us that we don't know when it's going to happen. We just need to be watching and waiting. 2 questions for you. One question. I'm sorry. 1 question. Are you ready? Are you ready? If the rapture happened today, if it didn't happen on April 23rd, if it happened today, would you be left behind? If it happened today, what would happen to you? If you're not saved, you're going to be left here. But you know what? Today's the day of salvation. Today you can be saved. You can be saved tomorrow, but don't wait till tomorrow. You can be saved today. Let's bow our heads, close our eyes this morning. Brother Chris comes. Sister Kristen comes.